It's our energy, our power source, our creativity, our intimacy, our everything. And when it's working well, we have joy. And when it's not working as well as it should, then all of a sudden it becomes the only thing we're thinking about because we are afraid of leaking, afraid if there's no bathroom, afraid if my partner sees or feels something. So we lose that power source, that creativity. It's not just leaking urine. You start to leak out your potential and your power.
Hello, SoulNet friends.
Welcome, SoulNet listeners.
Hello, SoulNet friends.
Welcome back to SoulNet friends. We are excited to welcome a special guest today to talk about all the things going on downstairs. And this is part of our menopause series. And we are welcoming the Vagina Coach, Kim Vopni, to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Kim! We have been waiting to have you on this pod because we just wanted to deep dive down into the vagina.
Not that sounds weird or anything.
No, not that that's weird. No. And I guess we kind of wanted to normalize doing that within a space of women. Let's just talk about vaginas together.
Well, thank you. You guys gave me the best welcome. So thank you so much. I feel honored to be here. And thanks so much for having me.
You are doing such amazing work out there for women's health in, all ages and stages that we go through. And I just wanted to, how do you get into vaginas?
Yes, it's always the question, how do you become a vagina coach? I was actually just speaking yesterday at a conference and I said, this isn't something I had on when I grow up, I want to be it came because of, I could go back all the way to 6th grade. I saw a childbirth video and it was part of our sex ed. And I thought, nope, I'm not doing that. And so I grew up thinking I was never going to have kids, but I still had this fascination about pregnancy and childbirth. Then I meet my husband and we were able to witness my sister-in-law give birth as she allowed us to come into the birthing room. And that was an incredible experience. And it was the first time that I had ever seen birth in a normal physiological way, as opposed to what you see in the media and what I had seen in that childbirth video. And the next day I remember asking her, is everything falling out of you? Because I saw how big your vagina was. And it was sort of like, we were right there. And so she said, no, it feels, I'm a little sore, a little tender. She didn't have any tearing. And she said, it feels, other than being a little sore and tender, it feels normal. And I thought, okay. And so that sort of planted the seed of things done differently. And it really inspired me to want to do this. And so the following year I was pregnant, my midwives had recommended a product to me called the Epino. So when I was asking about how do I prevent tearing and perineal massage and different birth positions, and they had recommended this biofeedback device from Germany. And after I gave birth the first time, I didn't have any tearing, and that was my ultimate goal. So at the time, I didn't really have full knowledge of the pelvic floor, really. I just thought, if I don't tear, I won't have the issues that my mom did. So I had a great experience. And I thought, well, why doesn't everybody who's giving birth use one of these? And I contacted the company in Germany and I said, hey, could I be a distributor in Canada? And they said, sure. And so I bought 5 units and that's how it started. So I recertified my fitness and I started to basically apply fitness principles to the pelvic floor. And I created a program called Prepare to Push, which was my first book and first program, which is helping pregnant women understand the pelvic floor before they give birth. And, knowing that pregnancy and childbirth are such big contributors to it, I wanted to plant that seed. So that's where that started. Then I recognized that we were in North America really overlooking postpartum recovery. And I was also starting to see this thing called diastasis recti, which is when the rectus, the six-pack muscles, move away from the midline during pregnancy. It can happen to anybody really, but so I saw that connection. And then I started a second business called Bellies Inc. with 2 other women. We were wanting to bring traditional practices from other cultures in the world that honored postpartum recovery into kind of more mainstream. So we manufactured our own postpartum wrap and coupled that with restorative exercise, juggled the 2 businesses for a while. And then now, fast forward, myself and my business partner started to go through our own peri-menopause journey. And then it was like, okay, this isn't just do your Kegels in pregnancy and here's how you recover more optimally. This is a whole life journey we have with our pelvis, with our pelvic floor. And then it started to be that was the time that most people were now seeking help. they had more time, they had more money, the problems were greater or showing up for the first time. And so that became an easier intervention. It's always, people always act when there's a problem. They don't act as much from a prevention perspective. Not that I still don't promote prevention, but that's kind of where it started. So that's how it all came to be.
So Kim's podcast is Between Two Lips, and you have a beautiful trailer that introduces this whole story in quite detail. And we really love on the pod, normalizing the emotional experiences that we go through. And you talk a lot about, shame and these kind of things. And I feel like there's few things that can bring upon more shame than peeing our pants. I love so much how you come forward and you share your story about, what you've gone through and how you are translating that to help other women and reducing the amount of shame and embarrassment that we feel around these really natural things that are happening to our bodies and what action we can take to decrease some of our suffering.
Yeah. And that was an interesting piece for me to navigate as well, because initially when I started, it was, I thought I wanted to sell this product. I wanted more people to be able to prevent tearing and learn about their pelvic floor. So, and I had done that. So it was sort of like, do this and you can avoid it like I did. And in my mind, as I said at the time, I thought if I don't tear, I don't have these problems. And then when the problems still showed up a few years later, I thought, well, hold on a second, I didn't tear. And I thought that's what was important. So as I was then now learning more about the pelvic floor, recognizing it's so much more than if you tear or not. And then for a while it was sort of like, okay, do I share that I'm having this challenge now? Because here I am telling people what to do, not to pee their pants and not to have surgery. And then I was now experiencing incontinence, and then I had prolapse, and I ended up having a surgery for a prolapse. So all of these things were sort of, I felt the shame and embarrassment that a lot of people feel as well. Plus I was trying to navigate it from a business perspective. And then as soon as I started talking openly about it, thinking that it was going to harm my business, it made me all of a sudden more relatable and a real person, and people could see that it happens to anybody, and also that I was able to overcome those in 3 different ways, right? So it gives people, it's the whole part of what's sometimes challenging with social media is that you don't know, is that real or that fake? And
Absolutely.
The more real you become, that's where you attract more of the people, because you're not putting yourself on a pedestal, like do this and you'll end up like perfect like me.
It's real talk.
I love that you talk about where you began and where you are. I mean, it's always changing. Our bodies are changing as we grow, as we age. And with my second child, I had diastasis recti. And I did the Pilates and I did the pelvic floor physio. And I did that. And I did it probably for a couple of years. And at the time I was like, I'm healed. And then I went through peri-menopause and I was like, oh my God. So I too had a similar kind of, I thought I was healed. And then I aged. Yeah. And my body started changing. And then I started having urinary irritancy and all these things. I just think that what you're doing is so remarkable, because this is like this has never been a part of women's fitness. But you are trailblazing and you're adding pelvic floor fitness to a woman's like regular routine.
Dayna, you probably know this. You said you're a fitness professional. Anywhere in your fitness certifications has the pelvic floor ever been mentioned?
Only through my own self-discovery. I have some certifications with Paul Chek, who goes very deeply into kind of core function and stuff. So that's been a part of my practice for a number of years. But that was me seeking out advanced level certifications that weren't part of the mainstream.
Yeah, and really, when you think about it, the pelvic floor is integral. It's the foundation of the core, and it should be in that fundamental. We shouldn't have to be seeking out advanced level courses to get this education. So I hope at some point in my life that the fundamental fitness certifications will incorporate the pelvic floor. Now, we're in this, thankfully, the world is talking and social media is exploding with the conversation. And one of the main things that's messaged is we have to lift heavy. You have to do impact. And agree. However, if your pelvic floor is not able to withstand that, you're going to have some challenges. So we have to make sure that our foundation is established and trained first to manage all of those loads.
And I love that recognition that, you can wear pads and you can do the period panties, which I've had clients come into me before too. And they're saying, well, but I've just adapted by doing this. And you're like resigning to that. And you're here to say, heck no, this does not have to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not just about let's stop leaking or let's stop the urges or let's improve prolapse. What's the why behind that? We want to do that so that we can lift heavy, so that we can participate in all the activities without limitation and fear and worry and angst. And I also want to kind of highlight that this is, to your point, Megan, was you don't do it and then we're fixed. This is something that just like we brush our teeth every day, we don't stop brushing and flossing when the dentist says you don't have any cavities. We carry on with that maintenance. And so once we've established this routine of a whole body pelvic floor muscle training protocol, I guess you can say, then that's just what we do for the rest of our life, for our bones, for our hearts, for our pelvic floors.
Mm-hmm. I love the word foundation too, when you talk about it being the foundation, because when I think about how I was trained and how I've, enjoyed and participated in fitness, for the most part, it's been external.
Mm-hmm.
The glamour muscles and
yeah.
It's been about strength, like yes, but also about feeling strong, feeling fit, feeling all the things, and a lot of the messaging was about, what you were seeing.
Yeah, the aesthetic component.
The aesthetic. And when I had diastasis recti, I remember I had a surgical consult and I had all these people, and it was all about getting my six pack back.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're doing, Kim, is really educating and informing women about their foundation, which is internal,
Yeah.
And it holds all this, right? It's like the holder of our health.
Yeah. Yeah. It's our energy, our power source, our creativity, our intimacy, our everything. And when it's working well, we have joy and we aren't distracted. And when it's not working as well as it should, then all of a sudden it becomes the only thing we're thinking about. And it's taking us away from, like, we're distracted at work. We're distracted with our families. We aren't participating in social outings. We're avoiding exercise.
Right.
Our life becomes very small because we are afraid of leaking, afraid if there's no bathroom, afraid if my partner sees or feels something. So we lose that power source, that creativity, right? It's not just leaking urine. You start to leak out your potential and your power.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I love that too. And that's where, on our pod, the Soul Net, that's for me is like the soul piece.
Yeah.
The women, that is our essence.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And when we disconnect from that essence, right, we live in a more fearful, more distracted, less engaged, less present, less creative space. So that's why we just love you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
So I'm wondering, Kim, if you can maybe just share like some of what we might be experiencing, because we talk about incontinence and, the bladder leakage, and that's, I think, fairly common. But I feel like this discussion around pelvic health is so much more. It's about what other changes are we often experiencing as women as we move through these hormonal changes. And of course, we go through these at different times of our lives as well. I know you focus on that, pre and postnatal as well. And they're all related to what, the hormones are doing. So can you just maybe share a couple other things that we might be experiencing as women?
Mm-hmm. A fairly new term within the last, I believe it's 6 or 7 years or so, is called Genitourinary Syndrome of Menopause. And it used to be called vaginal atrophy. That was the equivalent term at the time. And it was a descriptive to some extent, but there's so many other things than just shrinking of the tissues in the vagina. So this new term, GSM, Genitourinary Syndrome of Menopause, and there's also a new term for the postpartum, Genitourinary Syndrome of Lactation, which are highlighting this low hormone or low estrogen state that then has many different symptoms under this umbrella term. So there's different signs and symptoms. There's genital signs and symptoms, urinary signs and symptoms, sexual signs and symptoms. And upwards of, between 50 and 80% of women will experience one or more of those signs and symptoms. And when we think of, I don't remember now what the latest count is in terms of how many symptoms of perimenopause and kind of menopause there are, but there's a lot.
A lot.
But a lot of them will improve with time. And the symptoms under the GSM umbrella are not something that improve with time. And if anything, they can worsen. So some of the more common signs and symptoms, so genital changes could be thin, dry tissue, maybe even bleeding, feeling very irritated. We may even notice that the labia, especially the inner labia, start to disappear. The clitoral hood can adhere on top of the clitoris, which it's almost like the clitoris literally can disappear. And so visible changes, but also sensations or symptoms of dryness, itchy, burny that we may feel.
Which doesn't really help the intimacy part of our, vaginal health
we're on
too,
the sexual
right?
side. Yep. So sexual symptoms would be painful sex, bleeding with sex, post-coital bleeding or discomfort as well, increased risk of infection. And then on the urinary side, one of those infections, urinary tract infections, definitely increases bladder urgency, bladder frequency, stress urinary incontinence. And so some of them are symptoms we might have already been experiencing: the incontinence, the urgency, the frequency. And then now we get to this turning point where we are at a low estrogen state, and all of a sudden those symptoms for some may be showing up for the first time, or for others it's like the pelvic floor is now screaming at you. It maybe was kind of like little whispers, and no, we'll just put a pad, and no, it's fine, I'll get better one day, I'll pay attention one day. And now it's just like it's taking over their life. And that's where, when I was saying people are now more moved to take action, because it's getting to the point where it's just like, I have to do something. So that's like a lot of different things. And as I said, it could be, you might experience one of them, but usually people are experiencing several different ones. And yeah, they don't get better with time. And we can talk about how to address that, but those would be the most common ones, I would say.
It's amazing. And I will say, I always thought I had a really strong pelvic floor too, but that urgency, that is happening for me too, as they're changing. And I'm like, so we're all signing up for your course, but but it's really interesting, even those ones that we think we're in a really good place. And then we're like, oh, I am not in a good place here.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really, at the end of the day, it's lack of education and awareness. We are never taught anything about this. And we don't typically think about the pelvic floor until there's a problem. And then we go and seek help. And statistically, about 6.5 to 7 years go by of suffering before somebody goes to get help. And then when they finally do, usually it's to a family doctor. And I don't want to take anything away from the doctors. However, they're not trained in muscle function and fitness. They're trained in pillow for the ill and surgery. And so people are sent down that path of, well, let's try this overactive bladder medication that might also contribute to vaginal dryness, eye dryness, constipation, which are usually what women are already struggling with. Or let's go and have surgery. And people are like, yeah, sure, fine, I'll get surgery. And then nobody is telling them about the ongoing maintenance, pelvic floor physical therapy, or that, hey, you probably don't even need that medication or surgery. Let's put you down this path first. But that's not typically what's happening. So then people come and then they're like, I had a bladder sling surgery X number of years ago and it's failed. And I say, it's the sick care system that has failed you, not you, or not the surgery per se, because that probably wasn't even maybe necessary in the beginning had we addressed all of the other things. So to your point with urgency, urgency can be from the low estrogen state. It could also be from constipation. It could also be from anxiety that skyrockets in perimenopause. It could also be from tight muscles or overactive muscles. So if people who think, well, I'm going to do so many Kegels because I heard Kim Vopni on a podcast. She said to do this and I'm going to do them all the time. And then we can create the opposite, right? We need this balance between effort and ease. So people think they have a strong pelvic floor, but tight is actually weak, and they interpret tight as strong. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Diet, like caffeine and all the things.
That's the bladder irritant perspective, where you have unknowingly, again, we drink caffeine, we have alcohol, we even vitamins, medications sometimes, acidic foods, spicy foods, carbonated beverages. These are all very common bladder irritants. And people don't necessarily know that until they do an elimination diet or they do a bladder diary. And then the other thing is also restriction of fluids. So the people who are dealing with urgency or feel like they go to the bathroom all the time, or they're afraid of leaking, they think, well, if I don't drink water, then I won't have urges, I won't leak, right? And so then they become dehydrated. That's going to contribute to more urgency. They're also going to get constipated. That's going to contribute to more urgency. So if we have somebody who will help us explore this root cause conversation, I like so many surgeries and so many prescriptions would not happen.
With that in line around medications, there is this big movement right now, especially in peri-menopause, around HRT coming back around, and we're seeing some really great benefits. I am really curious of your thoughts on that, because you've got a very hands-on approach around strengthening the muscles and working from the inside out. Where does that HRT model fit with your work, or what are your thoughts or your feelings on it?
Yeah, I am a huge fan based on all of the evidence. I think our health outcomes are much more favorable when we are using bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, both systemically. So that's where, the patch, gels, creams, even oral tablets for some, and vaginally. So we can benefit from local vaginal estrogen, and that's in the form of a cream or a tablet or a pessary that is like a slow release that's inserted into the vagina and left in there for 3 months. The dose of vaginal estrogen is very low dose. It very little goes systemic. If anything, it stays and acts locally and ideally with a cream, we can put it outside and inside. It can address the tissues in the vagina, keep them supple. I always say we want a wrinkly vagina. Usually we want to prevent wrinkles, but we do want a wrinkly vagina. We want the folds in the inside of the vagina to stay there. And estrogen is one of the ways that helps us do that. But estrogen is also a part of what helps us build muscle. And in the absence of estrogen, it's way more challenging for us to build muscle. So based on the evidence, gold standard vaginal estrogen, I recommend it from the start of your menopause, which is usually 50-ish, for the rest of your life. So not something that you just use for a period of time. It's something that helps us. And a big one is prevention of UTIs. Our risk of UTIs goes up huge after we reach our menopause. Changes the pH of our vagina. We aren't as acidic. The tip of the urethra can, because of the retracting tissues, can become more exposed, leading us more prone to infection. And so that then typically we get prescribed antibiotics, and then we have antibiotics again, and we have antibiotics again.
And then our
become
guts are
antibiotic
off.
resistant. Yep. Yes. And so urinary tract infections can develop sepsis. People can develop sepsis, and sounds very dramatic, but it is something that we need to consider. So local vaginal estrogen is very...
In elderly people too, it's neurological.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
that's one of the first signs. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I hear daily from people in their 60s and 70s who are dealing with chronic UTIs and urgency and have never been offered vaginal estrogen, and they've been on round after round after round of antibiotic. And I just shake my head. We have loads of evidence, scientific RCT controlled trial, it's there. And the Women's Health Initiative, unfortunately, just led so many people down the wrong path. And there's so much fear around this word estrogen.
Thank you for sharing that. Because I am really curious whether that combination of the exercises that you're doing, as well as that estrogen, whether it is just vaginal or it is systemic, is that helpful to people that are going through your program? Do they get better results because of that?
Yeah, 1,000%. I hear daily from people, and it's a combo approach. So one of the biggest changes that people experience in the program is that they sleep through the night again. And that's a combination of estrogen. It's a combination of getting hydrated. It's a combination of getting over their constipation, and also the behaviors that they have established that they don't know. They are letting their bladder control their life instead of them being in charge. And so I was just at a conference, and one of the gals who was there, she specializes in bone health. And I had her on my podcast, and she said, I really want to have you. And she goes, one thing I've been meaning to ask you about, I wake up 3 or 4 times a night. And I said, give her the highlight. I'm like, these are all the reasons, and this is what I want you to do tonight. So she came to me the next morning. She's like, oh my God, I slept through the night. And the whole conference, we were there for 5 days together. She said,
Wow.
and she messaged me the other day and she said, I've been sleeping through the night ever since you told me what to do. And like, but nobody tells us this. So small little changes can make huge differences. And if we're not sleeping, that's also another thing that contributes to increased symptoms in our pelvic floor.
Well, and also anxiety.
Yeah.
Because we're now sleep deprived. So now we're more anxious about our pelvic floor issues. And it's a cycle, isn't it, for women?
Yeah, exactly. And anxiety and fear and worry is another contributing factor. And just on your note, your initial question, there was a very new piece of research I just found the other day looking at pelvic floor muscle training as one group, and the other group, pelvic floor muscle training with vaginal estriol. So there's 3 main different types of estrogen: estriol, estradiol, estrone. Estradiol is kind of our most potent. That's the one that is the most researched, I would say. Estriol is more prevalent when we are pregnant. It's a bit more anti-inflammatory. Estrone would be more prominent, produced from our fat tissue when we're post-menopause. It's a bit more inflammatory. So anyway, this study happened to use estriol as the form of estrogen. And the group that did pelvic floor muscle training with estriol fared better than the people who just did pelvic floor muscle training alone, which I thought was really cool.
Wow. I love that there's research being done on these very specific parts too, right? This is how we really change women's health, is by studying women.
Yes, exactly.
Something that has been like sadly ignored for a lot of years.
Yeah. Another cool piece of research that there was 2 pieces. One was looking at they use the terminology Kegels. So Kegel exercises done prior to a resistance training program. And this was with elderly women. So they classified elderly, I believe it was over the age of 70, which I don't agree with, but anyway, that's what they didn't say. And urinary incontinence. And the people who did again, Kegels prior to the resistance training were favored better and saw quicker results. And then there was another one that looked at combining, which this supports my bias, which is combining pelvic floor muscle training with resistance training. And that also had more favorable outcomes compared to Kegels or pelvic floor muscle training alone.
I love hearing that because I always start with core exercises before I start lifting anything heavy. So
can we jump into the Buff Muff Method and how we get on it, what it's going to help us with, how we stay on it, because we're thinking about that longevity piece.
Anybody who follows me knows that, yes, I appreciate proper anatomical terminology, but I also like to have a little bit of fun, because it's a heavy topic and we need to poke a little fun. So anyway, I like fun, catchy words. So Buff Muff, initially this is probably 5 years ago, I was running this 28-day challenge, and it was just a 28-day, at the time I had a program called Kegel Mojo. So I called it the Kegel Mojo Challenge. And as I was marketing it, I was trying to come up, and I took this photo of me with my vulva puppet, and I was flexing, and I said, I'm going to buff my muff today, and there was like, oh my God, Buff Muff, huh? So I just thought, okay, that's it, and I started doing Buff, and then it was like, I have to change the name. Kegel Mojo's, it's okay, but Buff Muff so much better. So so that's how the name came.
God, wait, I just have to say, the fact that you have what Elizabeth Gilbert would call big magic moments. Like you have like the moment where I heard you on your podcast talk about the moment that you came up with Vagina Coach, like on the spot, on a stage, joking about it. You've just like you have these magical moments where, and I just want to say to our listeners, like, not only are you our pelvic floor health expert, but you also come up, you're so attuned to yourself that when you have these magical moments, you see them, you hear them, you grab them, and you run with them.
Yes, I do.
And it's like, and that is what I think that's also part of the magic of Kim Vopni, right? So anyway, thanks for sharing that, because that's amazing.
Yeah. I'm trying to name a vaginal moisturizer right now, so stay tuned. I'll keep
it'll
you posted.
come to you.
Anyway, okay. So Buff Muff, it started out, I had created this program called Kegel Mojo. It was an online program. Initially, people, it got a lot of people in, but it wasn't, I didn't have the engagement. It was just kind of like, here's all you need, and bye-bye, good luck with it. That's kind of how it was. And I didn't feel like, after I did it, I was like, that's not, I want to want to be involved with these people. I want to help them along the way. So then I created this challenge, and that was where the magic started to happen. And people were getting these very quick, amazing results, transformations within this 28-day period. So I transitioned it to an ongoing membership now that is basically one place for people to come in, and I give them all sorts of different challenges and different levels and layers of workouts. And we talk about longevity and all the different health areas. We have coaching calls, but the method itself is kind of understanding, and I use the ABCs: alignment. So what's our posture, and how is our diaphragm aligned over our pelvis to optimize function? Breath. I call Kegels the core breath. And the reason I use the term core breath was Kegels, I want to honor Dr. Arnold Kegel, who came up with the term, and the fact that he was interested in helping his patients overcome pelvic floor challenges. And he was using a biofeedback device. And that's where the Kegel exercise came from. It's a voluntary activation and release of the pelvic floor. It's been very misinterpreted over the years. And again, as I mentioned, the Kegels don't train the pelvic floor dynamically. And they also are, people are, I think I'm doing a Kegel. Like no one's been taught, no one's been evaluated. And when I wanted to highlight core, that pelvic floor is part of the core, and it works in synergy with your breath, with your diaphragm. So that's why I use the term core breath instead of a Kegel. So we have alignment, we have breath, and then we have coordination. And the coordination piece is once we've looked at where is our posture, how are we holding our pelvis in space? Then once we connect our pelvic floor with the breath, now we want to start training the pelvic floor dynamically and bring that into movement. So we coordinate it into initially exercises like squats or bridges or lunges, things we've seen before. And then we start to, more sets, more reps, different activities, retraining the reaction time of the pelvic floor, building up strength and endurance and suppleness. So releasing the tension is, if not more important than the work part. We all think we have to do. And oftentimes we have to let go. So we start with the basics and the fundamentals, and somebody will absolutely have success with the basics and fundamentals. I sell it, promo it usually for $17. So it's very accessible for pretty much everybody. And then if people want more support, if they want coaching calls, which I find is really the gold, because you come in and you get people asking questions and you think, oh my God, I didn't even think to ask that, but somebody else has the same problem as me. I'm not alone in this. Yeah. They feel like they're validated. They feel they're supported. They learn from what others ask. They learn from the answers that I share. So I find that that's really a kind of what keeps people, when I want them to keep going, it keeps them engaged and keeps them motivated. And they recognize, like, people have had major weight loss transformations. Not that that's what I do, but that's what's happened, because all of a sudden it's unlocked this potential for them to do more in their life. They sleep through the night. They have sex again. It's pretty cool to witness.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. You're so right, though. That's it. Right? Because when you're sleeping through the night, then you're not as sleep deprived. You're not as tired. You're not as lethargic. Right. And when you're having sex, it gives you more energy.
It doesn't hurt. Right. Yeah. No one wants to have sex if it hurts and if they're tired and if they're cranky pated. Right. So we can address those things. Yeah.
So this is a membership community that you're talking about, like where people share and ask questions.
Yeah. So I do 2 coaching calls a week, and whoever wants to come on, I host them via Zoom, and we show up, and it's never, I don't have anything planned. I just basically, what's your questions? And I just start answering questions. And then out of that comes another question. And it's just fun. I love it. And so sometimes people can come onto this call and they could ask potentially a couple of questions within a question and walk away with information that would have taken them sometimes several months and multiple hundreds of dollars, and right, to see multiple people to get that one answer. Because our system here is also like, okay, it takes you usually 2 to 3 weeks to get into your family physician, and you can ask one thing in that 7 minutes that you have. So I feel like I'm aiming for this to also be bridging a gap that in the we need this sick care system. We need it when we have trauma, when we have major illness, when we need surgery, when we need pharmaceuticals, we absolutely need that. But so much of this pelvic health is not under that umbrella. And if people just had the information and resources, they could literally change their life.
Oh, amen. That's all I got. It's so
that's it, folks.
So amazing and inspiring. And I love how passionate you are about what you're doing. I love that you're spearheading so much of this. And Kim, I'm not sure how old you are or where you are in the peri-menopause, menopause piece, but I would like a little bit of some of your energy because you have all of these things going on. I know you're speaking on lots of places. You have this community. You're obviously showing up like a couple of days a week for these people to coach. I don't know if you have private practice too, but you're doing all of these things.
And your mom, mother and a wife. And I know. Exactly. Is it all in the pelvic floor?
It's all the pelvic floor. It's all the pelvic floor. I tell you. My JJ power. I'm 53 and so 3 years post-menopause.
Amazing. Yeah. So, and have you noticed a bump up since you've kind of come like post-menopause versus the peri part?
Perimenopause, excuse my language, was a shitstorm for me. I didn't know the term perimenopause. I had no idea what was happening. So it was kind of like late 30s where things started to be weird. And it took me probably about 5 or so years of just, talking to doctors and this. I had no idea. And now looking back, now that I've done a certification in menopause support. So I understand and I'm like, yep, check. It all was what was happening, but I just didn't have the knowledge to know how to advocate for myself. I remember going to my medical doctor and saying, I think something's wrong with my hormones because I had these murder scene periods and that's all I could ask about. So we do a test and it comes back, all the hormones were normal. And then she said, but your ferritin is very low. And it was like, well, no kidding. Because I bleed half of my body weight every month. So I feel like, again, we benefit from knowledge from many people that we can have this integrative approach and we can make decisions with more information. We can make a better decision and also understand what's happening. Had I just relied on that, I would have probably been on medication at some point for high blood pressure and high cholesterol, right? That are also things that happen. And so anyway, I feel very fortunate that I was curious and many people, Dr. Sarah Gottfried was one of the first books that I read that helped me understand what was going on. The Hashimoto's piece came on autoimmune was true for me as well. And the book Estrogen Matters, I think, was great. The new book, The Great Menopause Myth, those are all things that I recommend people read. And but yes, now on the other side, hallelujah. Like I feel stronger. I sleep so much better. I just feel very confident and in control and happy and joyful. And I'm not distracted by the craziness that happened over there.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you'd like to offer up to our listeners? Any kind of, tips or just, sage advice? You've shared so much beautiful information with us already, but.
Yeah. I always like to leave a message of it's never too late. I have women, my oldest known member is 93. And I know, right? And there was a woman that it wasn't her, it was another woman in her 90s who had met a new man and was, having sex again. I was like, oh my God. It was just, that is like, so it's never too late. It is absolutely never too late. And you don't have to have been pregnant at any point. This can happen to anybody at any age. Yeah. And, pregnancy and childbirth, definitely major contributors. And many of us will have gone through that, but you do not ever have to have been pregnant at any point. So take action. I always recommend, I think the most underused women's health resource we have is pelvic floor physiotherapy. So don't wait until you have symptoms, just go. Just like we've been conditioned from a very young age to see a dentist once or twice a year. And we go, even if we don't have a toothache, right? So I think we should be doing the same thing with our pelvic floor. See the professional who can help screen for challenges, keep things in check, identify things that we need to be aware of. And then you're doing your brushing and flossing, which is your Buff Muff, your hypopressives, all the lifestyle things that you do to help maintain function, right?
100%.
Again, so grateful to have had you here, Kim, and sharing some of your wisdom. To all of our listeners, you can find Kim at the Vagina Coach. And her Buff Muff Method is all the information on her community and all the beautiful programs she's created are all on the website. Your socials are the same. And we are just, again, really grateful to have you share your information with us.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity because this is also how the information gets out to more people, is people like you who have these amazing podcasts and communities that are listening, and that can help change the world too. So thank you very much.
SoulNet listeners, thank you for being with us. Next time on the podcast, we will be joined by Dr. Anna Lopez, who is a naturopathic doctor specializing in hormonal health. So many of her patients going through peri-menopause and menopause, she offers the Dutch test. And she's going to talk to us about what the Dutch test is and how it can help identify hormonal imbalances and dysfunctions. So we hope you'll join us for our next episode. Please like and follow and share our podcast with friends who may also be interested in these topics. We are grateful for your support, and we just love having you in our Soul Network. Please note that the information we share in our episodes is not medical advice. If there's anything that piques your interest and curiosity, please follow up with your healthcare provider. Thanks for listening.